Upon completing the Sayer's Vigil and War Within quests, you unlock the ability to construct your first amp, a tool to focus your void energy into a weapon that's deadly to sentience. If you have not done those quests yet, I highly recommend doing so before watching the rest of this video. With the new war right around the corner, releasing on December 15th, it's time to get yourself ready with the best amp you can. So how does this all work? I'm the Engineer, let's solve a practical problem. So with the War Within and Sayer's Vigil quests done, you'll have unlocked the ability to bring your operator physically into battle, and also have access to meet the Quill's Syndicate. Head down to Cetus and either walk up this pathway behind Khonsu, or simply fast travel to Quill Onko. You'll need to switch to your operator in order to pass through the doorway. Onko will give you your very first amp, a mote amp, which will at least get you started on the whole process of using an amp. The amp enhances your Void Beam, allowing it to deal more damage, fire in different ways, and have its own recharging battery separate from your operator's main energy pool. There are a number of uses for your amp weapon. For example, it's the main damage option for your operator. It can reset damage adaptation on certain enemies, like Sentience and the Stalker. It can disrupt the shielding of the Prophet Taker Orb, changing its weakness. It can kill Vomvalis in their spectral form, and it is the only thing capable of damaging the shields of an Eidolon on the plains of Eidolon. Now when you try to use the mote amp for any of this, you'll find it frankly pretty bad at its job, especially in damage dealing. That's why as soon as possible, you want to upgrade to a proper amp using the modular crafting system. If you've built any other modular equipment before, like Zors and kit guns, you'll be familiar with this process. You acquire 3 blueprints from the appropriate vendor, one for each of a prism, scaffold and brace. The prism is your primary fire mode, the scaffold is your secondary fire mode, and the brace is a modifier to the stats of your amp overall. With all 3 parts constructed, you take these back to an amp vendor such as Onko, and have them then assemble your amp. This assembly costs a tiny amount of credits, and the vendor will give you your amp in an unfinished state. Take your amp for a spin and level it up like any other weapon. You can do this either by killing enemies with your amp, completing objectives whilst you're in your operator form, or just being an operator around allies who handle the kills and objectives for you. Once you have your amp fully ranked up, it is time for the final stage, guilding. Return once more to an amp vendor and have them guild your amp under the other services category. This will reset your amp to level 0, allowing it to gain mastery XP from leveling up, and most importantly, this increases the amp stats to the maximum amount. And with that, you now have a fully operational amp. All amp parts have had their standing and material costs reduced recently, making it easier than ever to get the amp you want. Obtain the standing you need with Onko by trading in sentient cores. The basic version can be attained from killing Vomvalis as well as assorted other sentients in some missions, while the upgraded versions are acquired from taking down the Eidolons. If you're stuck on getting a specific resource or toroid, it's best just to refer to the wiki page on that particular resource. Now, of course, some amp parts are just better than others. Any guides talking about amps will refer to them by a simple number code, such as 123 or 777. This refers to the 3 parts in order, the prism, scaffold and brace, and the number is the order in which this blueprint appears and is unlocked in the 2 vendors. Numbers 1, 2, 3 and 4 are acquired from Onko in Cetus, while the numbers 5, 6 and 7 are acquired from Little Duck in the backroom of Fortuna. So to give an example, a 147 amp will be made of the first prism from Onko, which is the Raplak prism, the 4th scaffold from Onko, which is the Fard scaffold, and finally the last brace from Little Duck, the Certus brace. Building the right amp for you depends on what you'll be using the amp for, and just what you've unlocked. In looking at amp stats, status is almost entirely unimportant. For regular enemies, your Warframe is almost certainly your choice for handling them, so if you really need the Void status, you can use Zaku's ability Zarta's Whisper on any Warframe thanks to the Helminth system, and that will be more than enough Void damage and Void status procs for standard scenarios. Against enemies which need your amp specifically, a Void status basically never matters. Instead, you either need just pure damage, or in some cases a combination of damage and higher critical stats to make a good amp. So with this all in mind then, we can immediately throw out the 3rd, 4th and 6th prism, as well as the 1st, 3rd, 5th and 6th scaffold. All of these are lower damage, less effective options for all scenarios. Of the remaining prisms, the first, Raplak, is the easiest one to get and is a useful backup in Eidolon hunting, owing to its single shot, high crit nature. The second prism, Schwark, is not terribly good on paper, but it has punch through, meaning it can get more work done against multiple enemies. You can think of it like the Cat Moon of amps, but not quite as overpowered. The fifth prism, Cantic, is effectively a burst version of the first, with about the same potential output, making it mostly a matter of preference. And the seventh and last of the prisms, Clamora, is a very effective short-range flamethrower, trading range for an area damage whilst still keeping the high damage and critical chance of other top-tier prisms. My recommendations will be either the first or seventh prism, down to your preference and playstyle. Moving on to the scaffolds, the three better options are the Shraksun, the second scaffold, Fard, the fourth scaffold, and Proper, the seventh scaffold. Shraksun acts quite similar to the Schwark prism as a Catch Moon style projectile, except it also explodes at the end of its path, dealing overall more damage. Proper, on the other hand, deploys a timed bomb just a short distance in front of you, which deals significant AoE damage. Both of these have high critical stats and are the best options for taking down Eidolons. As for the Fard scaffold, this one doesn't get nearly as much attention overall, and yet it's a surprisingly powerful option. It fires a homing glaive, which will bounce around between enemies. It's able to deliver a reasonable amount of damage, combined with the highest critical stats of all amp scaffolds. Against regular enemies, this can feel like you're using Yondo's arrow, as your projectile goes whistling through enemy after enemy in quick succession, even out of sight. The damage doesn't get too amazing, such that by Sedna you'll find the stronger Grineer units usually take a few shots to go down, but that's true of all amps. What makes the Fard especially notable though, is that it's about the only amp I can find which properly exploits the Void status effect. Given that the Fard fires a long-lived, punch-through projectile, it can get trapped in a void bubble and continuously strike the enemy it's attached to. Against bombards, heavy gunners, and even the Eidolons themselves, this can allow the Fard projectiles to get a huge number of hits in, exploding their potential damage. There are two downsides to this though, holding it back especially in Eidolon hunts. Firstly, the Fard relies on a void status block triggering in exactly the right place. Without this happening, your shot will just fly away and be wasted after its first hit. Secondly, the Fard projectile still needs some time to actually get the damage done. For comparison, the Proper scaffold, with some serious setup, can pretty reliably just one-shot Eidolon shields. So this puts the Fard as a hybrid option, only the third best for killing Eidolons, but also a menace to ordinary horde enemies. And finally then, in choosing the third amp part, the braces, there are only two options even remotely worth considering. The third and seventh brace, Lorin and Certus. Lorin adds 12% to both the critical chance and status chance value of your amp's attacks. This is an absolute bonus, meaning an amp with 30% critical chance gets raised to 42% with Lorin, and the same is true for the status chance. The Certus brace on the other hand goes all in on criticals, offering 20% absolute critical chance, but with no status chance bonus. None of the other braces offer anything remotely comparable to these stats in terms of effectiveness, and so anything else would be a waste of your resources. Overall then, the best prism to pick is the one you feel most comfortable with, choosing between Raplak, Schwark, Cantic or Clamora. The best scaffold depends on your options. Proper for high investment Eidolon hunts, Shraksun for lower investment, or Fard for a hybrid Eidolon and general mob slaying amp. The best brace is Certus, or Lorin if you can't yet access the Certus brace. Lorin can also pair well with the Fard as the only option that cares about status chance. One final closing note, as we are on the cusp of the new war, things may change with that update. I don't know if there's anything that will affect amps, so we'll just have to wait and see. If you're watching this video sometime after the new war is released, just bear that in mind. Alright, and that about covers it on the basics for amps. I've not gone into detail about Eidolon hunting, as that involves far more than just building an amp. However, this video has given you what you need not only to get started on Eidolons, but also to handle all other enemies you might choose to turn your amp against. If you have found this video helpful, or learned something new, Make sure to give the video a like and subscribe as well to catch more as it goes live. That's all from me for now though, so as always, build amps, melt sentience, and fight well, Tenno.